Everybody, welcome to another edition of the IAIB Spotlight. I'm Andrew Zarian, and this week I have a very special guest, someone that a lot of you have requested for months and months, and possibly almost 2 years. I've been getting this request to have this man on the show. I'm joined by Tom Merritt. How you doing, Tom?
Good. I just kept resisting and resisting. So finally they broke me down. No, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And
absolutely.
I'm happy people care.
Absolutely. I've out of everybody that we've interviewed, the one thing that we get every week is, hey, when are you getting Tom Merritt in? When are you getting? And I know you've had a crazy couple months, so I think we tried to schedule this about 2 months ago, and then we delayed it, and then finally we're here, and we're going to talk about internet broadcasting and pretty much your career, because you started out in traditional broadcasting.
Yeah, actually, I started out in 1986 in radio. As a 16-year-old, doing country music by day and metal at night.
Oh, that's hysterical. So total opposite ends. But you went to school for journalism, right? Not broadcasting, not communications.
Well, I got a degree in journalism from the University of Illinois. Now, I started in the print track, so my introductory classes were all about print journalism, but I finished in the broadcast track. So at the University of Illinois, they just give you a journalism degree. They don't differentiate broadcast versus print, but you can decide internally which track you're going to follow.
When you were doing the radio station at 16, did you go into it as, well, this is just a job and I think it's pretty cool, or, hey, this is something I want to do?
Oh, it was definitely something I wanted to do. I was I wanted to get a job because I wanted to have some money to spend, and that's my parents were like, well, if you want money to spend, go get a job. The station had just opened up in 1985, and my mom was an aerobics instructor. This is such an 80s story. The secretary/wife of the owner at the radio station was in her class, and so she asked if they needed any help. And they said, yeah, we could use some help on the weekend. So I started by going in and playing the American Country Countdown, which was delivered on albums. And it was like, it was American Top 40 for country. And so I would just sit there and play those and play the commercials and the breaks and all of that. And then eventually I got to be able to talk a little bit on air some more and do some shows and stuff like that. But it was something I definitely wanted to do. It was really fun.
Did you have like an on-air name, or did you go by Tom Merritt?
Yeah, I went by Tom Merritt.
Okay.
I didn't go by crazy Tom Merritt.
I did, like, Tom, I did have man Merritt.
I did have some like embarrassing outro thing that I decided I would do at the end of my 2-hour shift, because I worked 6 to 8 p.m. So I could come in after school like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and even so, I created this whole like long goodbye to people who'd been listening, like anyone cared.
But I mean, that's such an amazing story, because that's not a possibility now for a 16-year-old kid to walk into a radio station and or have their mother hook up with, I guess, the program director or the owner's wife and get a job on the air. That's almost impossible at this point.
I don't know. I mean, I think it would still be possible at WGEL in Greenville, because it's a town of, well, it's bigger now. It's probably closer to 10,000 than 5,000, but it's still a 3,000 watt station. They're looking for people who can fill in gaps here and there. So it might happen. But honestly, I would tell people that's really not what I would go after. If you're wanting to do this kind of thing, I would just go to the internet and start doing it now. That was not an option for me at the time. I used to make my own cassettes, but they didn't go anywhere. And I bought the little AM broadcaster kit from Radio Shack, but that was 5 watts, and my neighbors could barely get it. Not that they would. So now you have a worldwide audience at your beck and call. You may not be very good when you start, but the earlier you start and the more you do it, the better you get.
I tell people all the time, the best thing you could do is do a show and have nobody watch in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're not used to talking on the air, start doing a podcast for nobody. I mean, don't even release it until you're comfortable being on the air. And then after that, you start doing it and you start building an audience. But for you were on the air. You were at 16, you were, running a radio show, which is unbelievable for most people. Where do you go from there? How do you continue that?
Well, what I did is I went to college, and at first at the University of Illinois, they don't let you into the journalism program until your junior year. So the first couple of years, I thought I'd be pre-law. I was major in economics. I was a major in history. I ended up minoring in Russian and philosophy just because I built up all of this coursework that I was interested in. But I worked at the radio station at the University of Illinois too. They have an interesting situation where they have a private radio station that's not part of the university that is student run. It was spun out of the university in the 60s and is run by a nonprofit called the Illini Media Company. They also operate the daily paper, the Daily Illini. And so I started working there because I had experience working in radio, and eventually worked my way up to be the program director of that for a couple of years before I graduated.
Did you like the behind the scenes stuff more? Or did you like being on air? Was that what you wanted to do?
I liked both. I really enjoyed being program director and working with the team to, select the music and figure out rotations and what worked and what didn't. We were in a ratings battle with the top 40 station for number one in the city. And then my second year, another station switched formats to classic rock. We were album-oriented rock, so we had to fend them off. That was really fun. I mean, it was nerve-wracking, but I learned a ton of stuff doing that. But I also enjoyed being on the air. My favorite moment of that entire stretch was being at the end of my afternoon drive shift when the Gulf War broke out, and having the news guy come in, rip and read, off the UPI machine, hey, there are shots fired, reports are in, and we just shifted into news coverage on a rock station. We kept playing a little bit of music, but we kept breaking back in with this happening, that happening, watching CNN, watching the wires. That was a rush. That was, and it felt like you were covering history because you were.
I mean, was that like a pivotal moment for you as, in your broadcasting career that, you experienced that? And like for me, I've had some of those moments where that has been the moment that I'll remember and I'll say, okay, well, you know what? This is why I do this. This is one of the reasons why I continue doing this. Like that rush, that feeling that you get is something that continues and kind of pushes you on.
Sure. And definitely at that time, that was a pivotal moment for me. It changed my views of the world. It changed my views of politics. And that feeling of going from being on the air and being the person who said, we now go to the newsroom, when that, historic moment happened, and then being the person behind the scenes helping to direct, how much our coverage would be, what we'd cover with the news director. Both of those sides of it were amazing, and I wanted to do it more.
So after that, I mean, years went by. Obviously, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because there's so much I want to ask you. But you started working at Tech TV in '99.
Yeah, skip over the part where I spent a lot of time in bars in Austin. That's good.
Is that what you did? Because I spent a lot of bars in Bayside, so we could bond over that.
Yeah, I went to grad school at the University of Texas at Austin. I didn't finish. I worked at a bookstore. I did a pirate radio station. I just kicked around trying a bunch of different stuff. And that's when I started my website, started learning HTML, taught myself how to code a little bit, and started doing the web. And that leads you right up to me getting a job at ZDTV because I had been running my own website. I had found people to write for it. I had a schedule. I edited them. I published once a week. So when I interviewed at ZDTV.com with Regina Preciado and said, hey, I would like this job as an associate producer on your website. I do all of the things you describe as the job duties already for nothing. So, I know how to do this job cheaply and I know how to do it well. She believed me. She looked at the website. She's like, yeah, okay, I'll give you a shot.
Were you a tech guy as a kid, or is that something that you grew into?
Yeah, I was definitely a tech guy as a kid. I would grab my dad's calculator and play with it. I don't know if I have it right to hand, but it was a TI-35, and then I wanted a computer desperately. I've told the story a million times about going to the store and wanting to buy an Atari 2600 with my allowance money that I'd saved up, and my dad saying, you can either buy that or you can get an extra $100 from me and buy the TI-99 4A computer. And I went with the computer, and that was it. I was into computers from then on.
Yeah, for me, my first computer was a Tandy.
Nice.
A couple years after
TRS-80 or
no,
or
I
later?
had the later one, the 2100.
Okay.
It didn't have Windows. I mean, it was running DeskMate.
Oh,
that
DeskMate
abomination.
You know, I still got a PC computing magazine somewhere around here. Popular Computing magazine that compares all the windowing operating systems. Didn't like that Microsoft one. Wasn't very imaginatively named, but DeskView actually was pretty highly recommended.
Oh God, I remember people loved it, and then they realized what a piece of junk it was. Once Windows started, Windows 3.1 came out, you're like, wow, I can't believe these two things are happening at the same time.
Yeah, my first windowing operating system was Windows 286 for an IBM PS2, and it was janky. I remember going to the lab in my freshman year in college and working on a Mac and realizing, oh, this is what the windowing operating system is supposed to work like. I had this heavily modded. What IBM would do is they'd sell you Windows 286, but they would add all these add-ons to make it work more like a Mac, like adding colors and more folders options and stuff like that. And it was just janky.
It gives me nightmares. I still have mine. It's sitting in my attic somewhere.
I have mine. It's right over. Yeah, it's right over there in the closet.
Every week I get asked to start running it on the show. On the tech show that we do here, and I just keep forgetting to bring it down, but I think I'm going to do it this week. Let's see what I can do on that thing.
It didn't have any hard drive or anything in it, did it? Or did it?
I don't think so. I think it was a solid state, yeah.
Yeah, because then it probably will run for a lot longer.
Because it's a solid state, yeah. It has a modem. I mean, I used to connect to Prodigy, so...
Nice.
Let's see what I can do with it. Dial up into Prodigy.
The only thing I don't forgive my dad for is I really, really wanted that Commodore modem that you set the phone down in the cradle on, and he wouldn't get it for me. He's like, no, we're not running up the phone bill.
Well, why do you want to connect to that thing? Who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares what other people are doing? So, I mean, that shows that you had the interest in technology. You started writing about it. You went to Tech TV. At that point, were you still thinking, well, I'm going to be an on-air talent, I'm going to start hosting a show? Was that still going on, or were you just writing at that point? That's what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I was way behind the scenes. When I started at ZDTV, I wanted to do the radio. In fact, I did ZDTV radio and Tech TV radio pretty consistently throughout my time there because they were always looking for people to kind of chip in and help out. They didn't have enough budget to have a permanent staff of more than one. So Erica Hill was their host at first, and then Ken Ray later on. But I was always in there helping out, doing some extra work just because I enjoyed doing it. Other than that, I wasn't on that much. There was definitely a bias against having staff on because it was so easy. So they would do it. They would have staff on, and anybody who watched the screensavers know they had staff on all the time. But they tried to make sure that they didn't encourage it. They didn't make it. They didn't want it to sound like, oh, well, anybody could just be on the show. And so I was more interested in making the website really good, because what happened over time is the person who hired me left within 3 months, and I took her job. And then layoffs started happening, and I'd get promotions as they would get rid of people. They'd realize, well, now we need somebody to run all of these things. And eventually, I ended up being the executive producer of TechTV.com. And so I was 100% focused on how do we make the best companion web content to go along with this television network, because that's the power of this network, is its users, is the people on the Netcam network, the people in the chat room, the people sending us email, and let's make a really good website for them.
So what I got asked this question on Twitter yesterday when I posted that you were coming on. Somebody wanted to know, and I kind of have the same question too. What made Tech TV so memorable for so many people that 10 years after its end, people are still talking about Tech TV, and it's kind of engraved in this tech audience on the internet. People that watch my show, people that watch your show, people that watch Twit. The Tech TV thing is still there for them. What do you think made it so special for the audience?
I think it was the fact that we included the audience so directly, and we were talking about something that they cared about a lot that no one else was talking about. I mean, it was a special time in technology, that .com boom. Lots to make fun of in it, for sure. But I don't think we'll see that kind of time again anytime soon, because everything was new. The internet was less than 10 years old, and we didn't know what its possibilities were, so its possibilities were endless. And everybody was playing with it and trying to figure it out. And suddenly here comes this network that says we're gonna be entirely about all of these things you care about. And one of the magical things about the internet was I can find other people that are interested in the same things as me, and I never could before. And now there was this network saying, and here's more of us, and we're going to help bring more of you together in a place. So I think that's probably one of the big things that made it so compelling at the time. And then over time, we always tend to be nostalgic and color things more pleasant than they were. I remember working at Tech TV and people complained all the time about, bosses and stupid decisions and this and that. And then now, you talk to any Tech TV former employees, they always wax, oh, it was so great, I miss it, and it's true. I both things are true. There were stupid things happening at the time, but at the same time, I've never worked anywhere like it since.
After that, you went to Cnet, obviously, and you were doing Buzz Out Loud with Molly Wood. At that point, before we talk about that show and how that show gained popularity, at that point when you started doing it, what was your vision of what broadcasting on the internet could be? Because my first experience with a online broadcast was IATA. A lot of people don't even remember IATA. They were a internet broadcasting, station. They had extreme funding. I mean, millions and millions of dollars had gone into it. I think Bob Meyerowitz was the main guy funding it. And it just went away due to, the expense of having, an internet radio station. They tried to do video in '99, which didn't work too well. At that point, what was your vision of it? Did you foresee it becoming, in the short time, in 10 years, did you foresee it becoming, a competitor to mainstream television?
Yeah, actually, I did, and I thought it would probably take 10 years or more, and I don't think it's quite there yet. But one of the things I remember struggling with at Tech TV was the website was really, and maybe I feel this way because I worked on the website, but I felt like the website was really where the action was because we were there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We had the audience all the time. We could interact with them whenever we wanted. Things were much more flexible and much easier to do. It took a crew of dozens to put on a television show. For the internet radio station, you just had a couple people and you flip a switch. And so I was like, this is where things are going to be. It's much more efficient. It's much more direct, and you can provide a lot more choice. So I remember when RSS came along, jumping on that, saying, yes, let's deliver our articles from techtv.com through RSS, give people more choices, give people more ways to consume the content they want. That's where it's going to be. Then I end up going to Cnet, where I actually end up working on the video. I go from working on a website at a television network, which is the secondary product, to working on video at a website, which is the secondary product. But it was fun in both cases because you're saying this is the growth area. This is the place where we can try new things and see what works.
So you started doing video. What were you doing? The video just in general for the website, for the reviews and stuff? What were you doing exactly on the video side?
Yeah, when I started working at Cnet, my job originally was homepage editor, and I had a bunch of other responsibilities.
IAIB's job right now.
It is now IAIB's job. It was a bigger department back then, sadly. But yeah, it's the same job IAIB has, and it was me, Molly Wood, Susie Brandon, and Tim Moynihan over not only the homepage but a couple other of the sub section pages, as well as any how-to content, any special packages. There's a bunch of things kind of grouped together that didn't fit neatly into the reviews beat. And one of the things they had just started doing was review videos. So they would have the editors sit down and talk about the product that they were reviewing, and they wanted to do more video. So, trying not to make it too long of a story, Molly Wood was writing the Daily Buzz, which was on the front page. It was a little quick, like, here are other things happening on the internet sort of thing. And she was writing a column called The Buzz Report, which was kind of taking that trends idea and expanding on it. And so when they said, let's do video, I said, why don't you have Molly do a video version of her column? And I think by that time she had moved the column into the Anchor Desk newsletter, but that's a little beside the point. But they're like, yeah, let's try that. So she was the first non-reviews video. And then when it went from there was what I was pushing for podcasting as well as a few other people. And they said, well, what if we have Molly do an audio podcast, but she'll need somebody else. Tom, you and Molly seem to have a good rapport. Why don't you guys do an audio version? That's how Buzz Out Loud became Buzz Out Loud, because it was the Buzz Report on audio.
On audio.
And then we went from there, and I said, look, I really want to do video. I want to do more video. So we started to come up with franchises, and they created the Cnet TV department, and I was able to transfer into that. Actually, that's how the front door position became a one-person instead of part of a four-person team at that point. So I came up with Top 5. I was doing a sponsored video called Road Warrior, which was just talking about mobile devices for a while. And then we just essentially were trying to come up with good video products that could be sold that would serve the audience and get views.
At CNET, I know that CNET has done it's pretty much run separately, right, from CBS Interactive, but it is CBS Interactive. Did it feel like you were working for a CBS, or was it still very controlled by CNET, and it felt smaller than it should?
Well, it's funny. When I started at CNET, it was CNET Networks. It hadn't been bought by CBS yet. And we were always treated as old media, right? Because what was new then was Gizmodo and Engadget, TechCrunch, and we were the old people on the block. And then we get bought by an even older group of people on the block. And so, CNET was CBS Interactive. When CBS bought us, they had obviously CBS.com, CBSNews.com, Last.fm, a few other properties, but they were buying CNET Networks in order to make that the backbone of CBS Interactive. So we became the flagship of the non-CBS part of CBS Interactive. And yet, they didn't really change anything. And I give CBS a lot of credit for that. When Comcast came in and bought Tech TV, they did not buy it for the content, and they changed everything. When CBS bought CNET Networks, they bought it for the content, for the expertise. And at first, they didn't touch anything. As far as I can tell, they really haven't done much of anything to CNET, with the special exemption for what they did at CES with the Best of CES awards. Other than that, they've left it alone. They haven't tried to push it one way or another. There have been a lot of attempts to integrate it with local television, with network television, to try to provide cross-reporting and this and that. I don't know if any of those have gotten real traction, but they've never come in and said, well, we want to change CNET to be this way or that way.
I have a couple friends on the CBS side of things, and a lot of them have been astonished at the fact that CNET works, right? CBS Interactive version of CNET with their content delivery always works, but whenever CBS has attempted to kind of replicate, let's say, a Buzz Out Loud, for example, it doesn't really work too well. And they always question, well, is it because CNET knows how to run it and they've kind of been left alone for the most part? Or is it just the content that's being delivered?
That's a great question. I would suspect it's the same answer if you can answer, well, why do tech publications continue to thrive on the internet while general newspapers, seem to have trouble? And I don't know. If I knew the answer, I'd be out consulting, making hundreds of thousands of dollars doing it.
If you have the answer, Tom, please tell me.
Yeah, right. I suspect it has to do with the endemic audience, right? If you're a technology publication, your audience is on the internet already. They're much more likely to be savvy and want to consume your content that way. If you're the Washington Post, a lot of your audience just wants to pick the paper up off the front stoop every morning. And, getting them to the internet is a problem, which becomes a problem for circulation numbers, becomes a problem for advertising numbers, makes you want to put up a paywall, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I also think that tech publications themselves, because they're populated by people who love technology, are much more agile. They're also newer, so they don't have a history of doing it this way that they can't pivot on. And somebody like the New York Times, the Washington Post, they have hundreds of years of history. So it's a lot harder for them to abandon certain ways of doing things.
Yeah, I mean, when you're an institution, it's very difficult to break away from the old way of doing things. And I guess, I mean, even right now, Tom, with what you're doing, which I want to get to because I'm so amazed at the way that you have figured out a way to make some money from this. With the Patreon campaign, there's so many questions I've been asked to ask you. But when it comes to broadcasting on the internet, I mean, it's an easy thing. Like if something's not working for you, 1, 2, 3, you could change it immediately. You could say, well, that didn't work. Let's try something else. It's much harder for a major brand like a Wall Street Journal or a New York Times to say, okay, well, this isn't working. What are we going to do?
Yeah,
a lot of money's invested.
I saw an analog of this problem at Cnet in 2004 when I started there, and I said I wanted to do podcasting. There was some resistance because they're like, man, do we really need to do that?
What was the first podcast you heard?
The first podcast I heard,
yeah, or you started listening,
was there were two, Coverville and Drive Time, which was this guy in Boston who actually did a video podcast way early, and he would just set a camera on his dash as he drove to work each day.
I remember that. Yeah.
And then obviously Daily Source Code. I listened to very early. Jawbone Radio. I listened to very early. Those were the ones populating my creative nomad back in the day.
Did you think there would be money that early on in this business? Podcasting kind of became this offshoot of obviously radio, but was there any money at that point for a guy with a camera that, just slaps it on their dash and just drives to work?
Who knew, right? I mean, to me, the point wasn't how much money are we going to make on this? The point was, what can this medium do? Let's start there. And I have always been a big believer that the companies that do it right make the products that people like and try to perfect them, and then figure out how to monetize off of that. Whenever you have monetization leading the products, you end up narrowing down what you do to a very small amount, and it doesn't work. And then that makes you vulnerable to something big changing in your industry and blowing you away because you're not flexible anymore.
So now let's talk about your going over the Twit. How is that transition for you from going from Cnet, which has been around, like you said, an old company, to this startup, that you're now part of?
Yeah, I wanted the flexibility. That was the big thing that drove me to change jobs. At Cnet, I had been doing some podcasts on my own because I really enjoyed podcasts, and Cnet was moving away from podcasts. In fact, I had a couple meetings where it was suggested that maybe Buzz Out Loud should be canceled, and they were canceling other podcasts, and they were saying, we can't really sell podcasts. We view them as promotional vehicles now. And so I felt like, well, you know what? I really think this is a direct medium, and even though the buzziness of it was wearing off at the time, I think there's something there, and I really enjoyed doing it. I think I want to continue to do it. CBS had a very good conflict of interest policy. It was a very, very sensible one. I couldn't make any competing content, but if I wanted to make non-competing content, I was allowed to do so and make money off it as long as I went through a conflict of interest resolution process with the lawyers. So for every show I wanted to do, I'd have to write up what it was, why I was doing it, what I planned to do with it. The lawyers would look it over, make sure it didn't violate Sarbanes-Oxley or any of the other things, and then sign off on it. But that was so cumbersome that I realized, I think I'd be better as a freelancer. So what I originally proposed to Cnet was make me part-time. I'll continue to do a few shows, but then I'll have the freedom to do other shows that I want. Then Leo offered, well, why don't you do shows for me and be full-time? And I told him right there at the beginning, I don't want to be exclusive. That's my only principle, is that I want to be able to do lots of different things for lots of different networks. And he said, that's fine. I have no problem with that. And Cnet was less fine with that. So what happened was, originally I was going to leave, go to Twit, do shows for Leo. I was doing a show for Cnet, and I was possibly going to do a show for Revision 3. We were in talks, and I was continuing to do Sword and Laser and a couple of other independents. And then Cnet at the last minute said, you know what, we don't want to have you do any freelance for us at all, and which I understood. They just wanted a clean break. So then I ended up doing Top 5 for Revision 3 for a while and doing other shows. And that was the beauty of it, was here's somebody in a little cottage in Petaluma who I respect, making great content, who wants me to come in and give me the opportunity to experiment and make great content. And I can continue to experiment on my own and make great content. So it was really attractive.
I think with podcasting, with internet broadcasting, exclusivity is a total negative. We've been offered, with GFQ, we've been offered like, hey, why don't you do it for us exclusively? And as soon as I hear the word exclusive, I don't want to do it. I want to be able to go and do whatever else I want. I don't want to be tied down to just doing, this for this company and that's it. I can't go and do another thing. And I think that's the beauty with podcasting. The fact that we really don't compete. I don't think anybody's really competing. If somebody's watching, my show, and, at times we cover cutting the cord, and somebody's watching Cord Killers, we're not competing in any way.
Right.
It's large enough for someone to say, okay, well, I'm going to listen to Andrew, and then I'm going to listen to Tom, and then I'll listen to Brian.
Well, and it was actually very friendly when I started doing Tech News Today, and Molly was still doing Buzz Out Loud. And not that we were totally like, buddy or anything. We weren't appearing on each other's shows, but they started taking their show in a direction that made sense for Molly and Rafe, or later Molly and Brian. And I started taking a show that made more sense for me and Sarah, and eventually IAZ, because I felt exactly that same way. Like, there's lots of people out there interested in this kind of topic, and there's room for different takes. Some people like a more serious take. Some people like a more relaxed take. Some people like a fun take. And the list goes on and on about what you can do. So there's all manner of ways to approach this sort of thing. Not that there's an endless amount of audience, right? Not every single show is going to succeed, but there's plenty of room. And usually shows succeed because they do cooperate with other shows, and that helps both shows build an audience.
Well, since we're on topic of shows succeeding, you going from Buzz Out Loud to Tech News Today, I want to know about creating the team, because that's an important part of what you're doing. It's a couple of people sitting there. The chemistry has to work. For you, for TNT, because we have a show actually called TNW, so I always say that. For TNT, how was it getting used to the team and things starting to flow? Was it instantaneous for you guys, where everybody just clicked, or did it take a while to kind of get there?
Well, when I left Buzz Out Loud, I was working with Molly Wood. And so I said to Leo, find me a very smart, tall, blonde woman to do my show with. And he found Becky Worley. And so it was like, nothing had ever, no, I'm just kidding. I was very lucky to get Becky to join me for that first 7-8 months of the show. I had worked with Becky at ZDTV and Tech TV, so I knew we had a good rapport, and I knew that was going to make it a lot easier. Plus, she was ABC News, so she brought chops.
She's a pro,
right away. Yeah, that improved the show immensely, and I think that was a great way to get the show up and running. Unfortunately, it ended up not being something she could continue to do because she took some additional responsibilities at Yahoo as well as ABC, and she has twins. So there's a lot going on, and I understood when she left. That was the point where I needed to actually create a team. I was lucky in getting a little bit of a head start by Becky being willing to jump in at the beginning, and thanks to Leo for talking her into it. That gave us a little time to ramp up and make some format, and then we were able to hire Jason Howell to come over and join us. Sarah and I had a good rapport. We had also worked together at Tech TV, so having her on Monday and Friday was great at the beginning. And I remember we had a conversation where I was like, God, I just don't know who we're going to get to replace Becky. And she's like, I'm right here. I'm like, do you really want to do this? I thought I thought you wanted to do other kinds of content. She's like, no, I want to try this. I'm like, well, crap, that's obvious. So we went with that. That was immediate because I knew we already worked well together. The only thing I said was like, I don't know that you've done daily news before, so here's what you're in for. And she's like, I'm up to the challenge, and she totally was. People don't realize just how much effort she put into getting up to that daily grind that we have, because she makes it look so effortless. And then I was looking for somebody to help out with the back end of research and reporting, and I knew Ayaz was great at that stuff. And we ran into him at CES. And Lisa Kensel just went over and offered him a job in the downstairs bar at the Renaissance. So we brought him out, and of course, you can't keep him off the air. So eventually, we had this team, and I think it took a while for the chemistry to really solidify because none of us had done a daily thing before. But because you're doing a daily thing, it starts to solidify really quickly. By the time we got over to the studio and we're doing the show over there, we were clicking, and it was an amazing team. And I wish I was still with that team because we were constantly improving too. We as a team always wanted to find what was working and continue to do it, but also figure out like, well, what can we tweak? What can we change? What can we make better? So we were always checking in on that sort of thing.
I think the term effortless really identifies with that show because you guys were so comfortable with each other. And it's the personalities too. I mean, I had lunch with him when he was here in New York, and I mean, we sat down over a couple of beers and spoke for like 4 or 5 hours about, just the industry.
That guy's a talker.
Oh, listen, I am. Maybe it's a Queens thing. I don't know.
It must be a Queens thing. Yeah, it must be.
We're a little chatty, especially when we have a couple drinks. But I think that was the magic behind the show, where you guys were so comfortable with each other, and everybody was they knew their spot, and it was a tight show, and there was no dead air, and everybody had a role. And that's an important thing with a show, and I think that's very difficult to find. If it doesn't work, obviously there's going to be a little bit of getting used to, but if it doesn't work, it's not going to work. And it's magic, really, when you find someone that you really connect with on a show.
Yeah, and that was something that I lucked into, but also took some work, right? We had to bring Ayaz into the culture of Twit at the beginning, right? Because he had been working in a lot of different places, and there were just a lot of questions about what do I do and how do I do it, and when is it appropriate for me to do this and that. But we were over that hump in a few months, and then you're right. You can't fake it anymore. It either works or it doesn't. And we had a lot of conversations about, well, how much should we get into it on the air? Conflict is good, but we don't want it to be uncomfortable. And so you fine tune a little bit, but most of it was just natural. We just let it roll.
Let's talk about your new adventure, the new chapter in the Tom Merritt life. You have gone independent. This is amazing. You've had, since 2004, you've really been on the air in the tech world, in the podcasting world. So you have about 10 years of, reputation, and people have come over. You're doing 2 shows now. Actually, you're doing more than 2 shows, but 2 that you're doing a campaign for right now. Cord Killers, which, let me just tell you, Tom, no BS, that is my favorite show to listen to.
I'm glad.
I just, the chemistry with you and Brian, it's just unbelievable. And I have to tell you, it is number 1 on my list right now to listen to. And I know people that don't listen to podcasts. They're not podcasting guys. Even people that actually work for me, they're not really into listening to podcasts. Everybody's downloading this thing. Everybody loves
cool.
it. It's a phenomenal show. The community really is unbelievable. But I want to talk to you about taking your shows and going independent. You did Frame Rate on Twit. Now you're in charge of everything, right? You have to do the video. You have to do the audio. You have to do, the marketing of the show. Walk me through that. What is that like for you, for someone that went from, a company kind of doing a lot of the grunt work to being totally independent and having to do the work yourself?
Yeah, that's awful. I'm not doing that anymore.
It is awful.
Sounds like a lot of work. Well, so Daily Tech News Show is probably the simplest transition, but the hardest one at the same time. I essentially have taken all of the things that I did, and I'm doing just those. So it's a little bit of a different format, because I don't have co-hosts to bounce off, and I don't have co-hosts bringing in discussion stories. But that preparation is the same. The content is the same. And I've been lucky enough to be able to have a producer named Jenny Josephson to help me out with a lot of the production side of stuff. Luckily, the tools of the internet are such that some of the things that I don't necessarily need to do can be done rather simply. And this is the thing that I still haven't wrapped my head around exactly what my philosophy is, but yes, you can spend a lot of money on a lot of equipment to make things look and sound better. But what's priority 1 for me is the content. So Google Hangout is what I'm using to substitute for a lot of things. It doesn't do them as well as people using better equipment, but it does them fairly well. And in the same way that in the 90s, when I was doing my own website, my website was certainly not as good as, The Onion or the New York Times or any of those types of publications. But my content was able to be seen and consumed, and so it worked. And that's the beauty of the internet to me, is that you can do things much more efficiently. And yeah, there's maybe that last 2-3% of quality that you may need to differentiate yourself from eventually if you really want to get massive. But there's a lot of things you can do that don't detract from the content, don't detract from your message or what you're trying to say, and make it easy for you to get them out there. And it has been better than I expected. I expected to have many more technical issues than I did with Hangout when I decided to try that. It's improved a lot. But then at the same time, Cord Killers, we're doing Skype. And the reason that works is that Brian Brushwood has done a lot of work to create his own studio already along the way. And so he's able to shoulder that part of the burden for that show. And Scott Johnson at Frog Pants has done the same thing. So for Current Geek, the weekly show that I do with him, he's shouldering a lot of the for that. So I'm lucky enough to know all these people who are doing the same thing that I'm doing and doing other parts of it. And we can all kind of fit it together and pull in the same way. And then on top of that, like you mentioned, we have this amazing audience that overwhelmingly wants to help. And I'm still not sure how to react to that, because I don't want to take advantage of them, but I also don't want to feel ungrateful, because they're willing to pitch in and make logos and do marketing essentially, and come up with intros and segment intros and contribute to the show. There were 2 days where I had to shoot episodes of Sword and Laser Video where I couldn't really do the show, and thanks to Jenny and the audience, we put together audience created shows for 2 days. It was amazing.
That's unbelievable. I think the community really is a big part. And again, back to Tech TV, I think that was, like you said, that was a major part of Tech TV's success. I mean, it was a small group of people. It was a very isolated demo, but it was still successful in terms of what the community was able to do. And it was all community driven. Think about all the other networks on television. I don't think anybody's watching, well, maybe Bravo because of the Housewives. That's a phenomenal series, Tom. Let me just tell you.
Sure. No,
the Housewives of Beverly Hills.
I watch it for Top Chef myself, but
I mean, like, even let's say Bravo, people watch it, but they're not committed to the brand. Sure. Nobody is fighting for that network to stay on the air. With Tech TV, that existed. Let's talk about discoverability, because this is something that a lot of podcasters face. With you have many shows on many platforms, and you're connected with different people. How is that for you to be found and to be heard? What are some difficulties of that?
Yeah, the one of the difficulties is being able to tell people who don't know you're gone, right? So I'm still finding people posting on Daily Tech News Show or on TomMerritt.com, hey, I just discovered, where you are. Or even better is the people on TomMerritt.com who say, let me know where you end up, when the blog itself has got all of the places that I've ended up and what I'm doing there. So just getting people to see the message is the hardest part. I'm lucky enough that I've built up, over the years, from Tech TV to Cnet to Twit, enough of a presence that I can get a lot of people who are willing to follow me and tell other people about me. And so that's a big advantage that I don't discount. And iTunes has actually been really nice in putting my shows in New and Notable and promoting them. And that we've got a Cord Killer special today about how to cut the cord that they're promoting. So, I get some stuff that somebody just starting out wouldn't. But really, it's about word of mouth. To me, anything that I've done where I want to spread the word, I've gone about spreading the word by just telling folks to tell other people if they like it, and then going on shows like yours and having people on my own shows who are willing to tell other people about my shows just naturally, because we talked about them.
The best way to gain a new audience, and like you said, you've built up 10 years of reputation on the internet, but after a certain point, you kind of reach the max of, okay, these are people that know Tom Merritt. So how do you go beyond that? And like you said, going on other people's shows is the best way to market yourself. It
is. And the other thing that I personally believe, and maybe I'm nuts, is that I don't want the biggest audience. I want the best audience. And I've followed this on Twitter. I have a stupid Twitter name, and I don't go out and do all the things you're supposed to do to gain a massive Twitter following. And one of the reasons I do this, I sort of backed into it with my dumb Twitter name, which is a whole long story, was I realized that the people who were following me really wanted to follow me. I wasn't just picking up people who got tricked, or I was on a suggested list maybe and they thought they'd sample me. I got people who sought me out. And this goes to what Will Wheaton always talks about, and he's not the only one who talks about it, but he's the one I remember talking about it the most, which is you just need 5,000 dedicated people in your audience, and you can do anything. And I feel like Brian Brushwood and Justin Robert Young have proven this quite a bit, where they don't have the biggest audience, but man, they've got a great audience, and the audience is dedicated to what they do, and it makes what they do so much more successful because of that. So to me, it's about pursuing the quality of the audience, not just the quantity of the audience. And that changes the game, right? It's not about, gosh, how do I get enough money to put out a big marketing splash? It's about, where do I find the people who really will enjoy what I'm doing and be dedicated to it?
I mean, you're absolutely right. I would rather have 1,000 Twitter followers that are extremely interactive than 100,000 that really don't care. I mean, you see people on Twitter all the time that 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 followers, but there's nothing behind it. They're just followers. Who knows if they're bought? Who knows if, maybe they were on a different show and they gained popularity from that. But it doesn't really go a long way. Yeah, your reach is a lot more, but if they don't care about what you're talking about, what good is it?
Yeah, and it's not an either or. It's not like, go for a small audience. It's about, yes, of course you want to have a large enough audience that you can make something happen and be relevant and speak to people. It's just about priorities. To me, it's about sustainability, not just growth, not growth first above all.
Let's talk a little bit about monetizing, because we're actually running out of time. I could talk to you for hours, but I guess we have to end the show at some point.
Yeah, I got to go do one of my shows eventually.
What time do you have to be out of here? Just so I know.
I should be out of here within the next 15, 20 minutes. Probably.
Perfect. Monetizing a podcast is a very difficult thing for people. I know people that have been doing a podcast for 10 years, in terms of what a podcast is, and they still find it really difficult to monetize. There's a couple of reasons why. One, there's only a select number of advertisers that are willing to advertise on your show. I think we all know what it is, and I think we all share the same advertisers. Two, how many times are you going to get your audience to purchase the same product? Unless, you have an audience that is large, or if it's recycled and you're changing viewers all the time, which that's not a great thing either. But you're doing something different. You're doing a campaign. You're doing a crowd-funded campaign to support the show, both with Daily Tech News Show and with Cord Killers. That's amazing to me that there's so many people committed to supporting the show. Tell me about how you came to that idea of doing that. Are you looking to do any kind of other ads, or is this something that you see being the core of revenue for the podcast?
Yeah, when in December, when I had to start thinking about doing stuff on my own, my original thought was, well, I start doing my show, I put it up, and I have somebody sell ads on it. And that's what I was thinking about. But I knew about Patreon. I don't remember when they launched, but from the moment they launched, they'd caught my eye, and the idea was pay per podcast. Now, they weren't built for podcasts particularly. They were built for all kinds of creative enterprises like arts, music, but podcasts fit very well into their mode, which is you get people to say, I will give you $10 per show, or I'll give you $5 per show. And this works great for weeklies like Cord Killers, where we say, great, we'll provide you a little extra bonus content, little inside information. You can do rewards. It's kind of Kickstarter meets PayPal, in that you can have that donation button, that subscription button, but you also have some tools that let you see a little bit more about your audience and provide them some benefits and content. And so Brian and I decided, well, what the heck? It can't hurt. Let's try it. We know we can get sponsors for Cord Killers if we need to. Let's see how far this can go. And the response was amazing. It was much bigger than we expected. And so far, it's been plenty, to the point where we're talking about licensing the show to somebody on a non-exclusive basis, but we're not to the point where we've decided not to take ads, but we don't have to yet. So we're keeping an eye on this and seeing how it goes. Daily Tech News Show, originally, I was going to build up an audience for a couple of months and then hand it over to somebody to sell. And I was looking at the Patreon from Cord Killers. I'm like, well, shoot, let's try this. Let's see what we can do. And it's funny. I thought saying like, hey, I might be able to go ad free. Wouldn't that be great? Would be like hands down a big thing with the audience. But this is the interesting thing about an invested audience. A lot of them were concerned and said, please don't say you won't take ads. Yeah. We want you to succeed.
And that's amazing.
The premise was, well, this Patreon thing's fine, but we don't think it's going to work.
Yeah.
So please do ads because we want you to keep doing the show. And I haven't been dogmatic about it, and I haven't said I'm not going to take ads. But it does change the dynamic. There's nothing wrong with advertising. There's two things about taking advertising. One, whoever you take the advertising from always has an influence over your show. It doesn't matter how much you don't want them to or how far away they are from your core content.
Hey Tom, it's not a promo code, it's an offer code.
Yes,
have you gotten one of those?
Yes, actually have. And there have been cases where I needed to pay close attention to which advertiser I'm reading because of that. Because some want the opposite.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, we do want it to be an offer code, not a promo code.
I just dealt with that last week.
Yeah, and then there's tracking. All of a sudden, like this idea of like, all I want to do is make my content available in as many places as possible so people can consume it. The advertisers want to know that people saw it, rightly so. So yeah, you've got a lot of issues that come along with advertising, and the money causes influence. Money from your audience causes influence too, because suddenly people are like, hey, wait a minute, you got to pay more attention to me because I'm giving you money for this. It's all a matter of how much influence do you want from what quarters, and how much does it make it complicated if you take money from different areas?
I think it's a combination of everything, right? We had the same exact discussion on What the Tech. Paul Thurrott and I do a weekly just rambling tech show where we just yell and scream about things that we hate. I mean, it's perfect. We get drunk at times. It's actually become this little bubble.
Do you take Mary Jo Foley's craft beer recommendations?
You know, I've gone out drinking with her, and she could drink me under the table. I mean, unbelievable. She's unbelievable. But she always makes fun of me because I like Pinot Grigio, and Paul and her will make fun of me on Twitter for about 2 hours and make me feel really guilty that I just finished an entire bottle of Pinot Grigio.
They know their beers.
I sometimes just take pictures of like Bud Light and I just send it to them to watch them explode.
Just taunting them. All right.
Hey, what do you think of this one? I discovered this one last week at the bar. But
it's a little St. Louis area beer.
But with the audience, we were throwing around the idea like, hey, we want to do this Patreon, and we said, look how successful Tom is with this thing. Look at Brian with this thing, and we may not take ads. And the audience said, oh, what are you, nuts? What do you mean you're not going to take ads? I'm like, yeah, but I want to. If I'm getting money from you guys, I'd rather not do ads. They're like, no, make as much money as you can. What are you, stupid? And I find it unbelievable that the audience kind of wants you to succeed in that sense. No, they're not complaining like, Tom, I'm giving you money. I'd rather not hear an Audible ad at the start of the show. I'm not getting that, and I'm sure you're not. I'm sure there are going to be some people, but.
Well, this is the thing: is an audience is made up of lots of different people. So there are people saying, "Hey, if I'm backing you on Patreon, I don't want to hear ads," and then there are people saying, "No, get as many ads as you want." I think there are people who are like, "Ads is familiar, it's easy, and I don't have to think about it." So with a Patreon model, they at least have to think about, "Oh, I'm not giving him money. Should I be giving him money?" And they don't want to feel the guilt, right? With an ad model, they can just think like, "Oh, that it's all taken care of. I don't have to worry about it." I get that. That is a familiar and easy model where you're thinking someone else is paying the bills. Now, one aspect of this that you have to remember is when any show takes ads, some of that money is good. You're all paying for it, right? Because the ads only are placed because you are going to spend money. Now, maybe you aren't, but someone in the audience is going to spend money on that product. And when they spend money on that product, a lot of it goes to the advertiser, right? And only a chunk of the money you're spending on that product is going to the ad budget that gets spent on the show. When you do a PayPal donation, like on No Agenda with Adam Curry, or a Patreon, your money is going, a small percent gets taken out in transaction fees, but a much larger percent of your money goes to the creator. So you're supporting that person more directly when you do something like that than when you shop at their advertiser.
Absolutely. What are some issues with production? I know that part of the Patreon campaign is to upgrade the production. I know you said, Google Hangouts are pretty good, but you want to do some more changes. What are some of the upgrades that you're looking to do?
Well, the first thing we're working on is audio for the Daily Tech News Show particularly. I want to make sure that I'm recording source audio, because what I've been doing just for time's sake is taking the MP4 out of YouTube and dragging it into Audacity. And if I don't remember to switch the Google Hangout to studio mode from voice mode, you get a lower quality of audio, and it shows. So I want to do more to make sure that the audio is working. I want to tweak the settings. I don't know if I want to add a lot of equipment per se. We're not making that much on the Patreon yet, but maybe a second mixer in order will help out a couple of different things, at least on the local. Audio hijack might be all that I need, though. We'll have to see. On the Cord Killers side, we want to get another desktop that's a little more powerful for Brian, so that he can bring in the video more smoothly without having to worry about maxing out his resources. And we're working on more transition elements and video elements and things like that.
Do you think it's a distraction to have, like for you, before you showed up and you did the show and that's what you concentrated on, but now I don't know what your workflow is there, but I'm sure you're having to worry about more issues happening.
Yeah, not as many as I expected, honestly. But yeah, I mean, obviously, if there's a problem with the podcast downloading, then I'm the one who has to fix it. But that was already true for shows like Sword and Laser and It's a Thing and Autopilot. Scott handles Autopilot, but FSL Tonight. So it was like, oh, well, now I have to worry about that with these. Honestly, it was a lot of work in January because when you start something, it's always more work. Right, you have so many more questions, new people coming in, and all of that sort of thing. And CES was happening, and then I had to go shoot an entire season of Sword and Laser. So yeah, it's been a crazy amount of work. I feel like it's starting to settle down a little bit, and with the help of the audience, with the help of my co-hosts, with the producer on Daily Tech News Show, Jenny, I don't feel overwhelmed. I feel like this is manageable. And what I worry about, what I'm concerned with most, is I don't want to overcomplicate it and add problems that don't need to be added because they don't provide enough of a return.
Oh, there's so many distractions here. It's like a Turkish bazaar in this studio. I got 5,000 monitors going, and at times it becomes difficult. But
well, yeah, I can make my audio better by adding a compressor, right, or a noise gate. There's all kinds of equipment I can do that'll improve the audio. The question is the cost and complexity of maintaining and running that stuff worth it? Does it make that big of a difference? I don't have the answer to that necessarily. It's a debate that I have with Jenny all the time, which is, where is that line? And it's not that one of us is on one side and one on the other. We're both trying to figure out, like, okay, what does make sense to work on? Because we both agree priority one is the content. And everything you do should serve improving the content in a significant way.
Before we end the show, I always ask people this when they come on the show. What do you see the future of podcasting and internet broadcasting in 5 years? What do you see changing in this little bubble we're in?
Well, I think video is probably going to experience the most change. I think audio podcasts got their second big wave when apps came along. The first big wave was when iTunes added podcasting, and then that declined or really leveled out. And now all of a sudden there's people listening to podcasts who've never heard of them before because they have an app. That was the biggest change for me launching these new shows, was realizing the people who don't know about RSS. They have no idea what that is. And when you have a subscribe button on your website, they're like, I don't know, press subscribe, and then I got these things that I just want to find it in my app. How do I find it in my particular app, whatever app it is they use? And there's hundreds of them out there. So I think audio podcasting is probably going to just continue to get to be more like radio on your phone, on your mobile device. Maybe it's a tablet, maybe it's built into your car. And so that's where that game is going to be played out. Video, I think, is going to be tumultuous. I think we're going to experience a scramble and a land grab for space on either set-top boxes or smart TVs or whatever shakes out of this cutting the cord movement as the place to watch your video. And we'll probably see a couple of players emerge who have control of that. They might be cable companies. They might be some cable companies and some manufacturers like Apple and Google. Who knows? But that will be the place where if you really want to have a massive video audience, you're going to have to be on those platforms. But at the same time, the internet's still the internet, and the internet always routes around any obstacles. And if you're not worried about the worldwide massive audience, you're still going to have lots of opportunities to get your message heard out there on the open internet somehow, barring some catastrophe like, net neutrality falling apart, which I think there's a lot of good natural pressures to keep that, but that's a danger right now. Or bandwidth caps ending up having teeth in them and getting clamped down instead of loosening up. Again, I believe that there's enough other pressures from content manufacturers like Google and Netflix to keep bandwidth caps from really becoming a widespread problem, but they might. So there's lots of threats to that open internet. But as long as there is an open internet, and I believe there always will be, there'll always be a lot of other options brewing that we can't even predict.
With the content delivery, for the kind of show that we do, which is a similar format, does that work on the TV? Do you think this type of format is something people will sit down and watch in their living room or in their office? Or will it be a prominent thing on, a laptop or a desktop?
I think the distinction starts to go away. I think people just want to watch what they want to watch, where they want to watch. I don't want to get too far into my cord killer's mantra, but they want to watch what they want, where they want, and how they want it. And that will not matter. I think they'll want to be able to see it on whatever screen they happen to be sitting in front of. So I think that Twit's long-term goal of being a 24/7 live channel is a good one, because there's going to be people who really want that. And they're going to want to be able to access it at work, on their laptop in a corner. They're going to want to access it on their TV at home, whether it's on their Roku or something else. And then there will be people who just want to have a playlist of their own options rolled into that. But I think in the end, what people want is being able to easily get to the stuff that they want to watch. That's right now, you have to work a little bit for it. TomMerritt.com is the website. DailyTechNewsShow.com is the show. Cord Killers, another phenomenal show. Support the campaign. Support the Patreon campaign. If you guys are listening on the IAIB website, I'm personally supporting both because I think they're phenomenal shows, and I would love to see these two shows really do well with a crowd-funded platform, because I really have not seen anybody else with a significant push to, funding an episode, of funding a monthly subscription to the show. I think it's unbelievable. In the chat room, people are posting it right now. If you're watching live, click on it. I mean, even $1 really goes a long way when you have a couple of people doing it. By the way, Tom is not paying me for this. I'm not getting money. By the way, you could write that check out, Tom. Andrew's paying me for this. That's
I'm paying Tom.
Thing.
I know. I lost that on this.
Thank you for supporting the Patreon, by the way. I really appreciate that.
I'm a big believer of supporting things that you enjoy, and more people need to think that way, because really, you guys are putting in so much effort and so much work into growing it. It's great to see it evolve in front of us, especially with Cord Killers, where you guys are adding elements every week and adding graphics every week. It's actually really cool to see how the production is growing rather than it to be boom, here it is. I'm a big fan. I'm glad, because that's how we ended up having to do it. So I'm glad that's good. That's fun to watch, and it's not painful to watch. But no, seriously, man, thank you, and thanks to everybody else who has backed us. So for Daily Tech News Show, we're just asking for $0.05 a show. That's $1 a month. If everybody in the audience did that, we'd be golden. And you know what? People are doing more. I mean, you have for Core Killers, you have 1,200 Patreon, I guess, people that have donated, and you guys are up to $2,100. So people are actually giving more than you guys are asking for, and that actually goes a long way. That shows how committed the audience is and the community is, which is amazing. You can follow Tom on Twitter, AceDetect, ACEDTECT. I've actually spoken to the other AceDetect many times, thinking it's you.
Oh yeah, that's Kuhan. He manages that. He just started doing that on his own to help direct people to my ridiculous handle.
I think I had like a 45-minute discussion about beards with him one time, and then I realized he goes, "I'm not Tom, right?" I go, "Nope, did not know that." Cord Killers is on Twitter. Daily Tech News Show. Every day you're doing it. Different
Monday
guests.
through Friday.
Different guests. Yep. Are you going to find a permanent co-host, or do you want to do something different?
Don't know. I mean, right now, it just sort of lucked into the fact that this seems to be working. It seems to be fun. But yeah, we're taking it naturally and seeing how it evolves. We may end up with like regular slots, monthly slots, weekly slots. I don't know yet. We'll have to just see how it goes.
Is it a difficult thing finding someone that could commit every single day at the same time?
It's difficult finding somebody that can commit every single day, knows the technology world enough to report on it, and meshes with the kind of show you want to do. And, there's so many considerations there. So it's not something you just want to slap anybody into, for sure.
Great. Guys, if you miss any portion of the show, if you came in late and you missed the beginning, it's going to be archived, so no worries. On gfqnetwork.com, also on the IAIB website, it's archived there. We're on iTunes, we're on Twitter, we're everywhere podcasts are available. I would love to have you back on, Tom, talk about more stuff with internet broadcasting. There's so much I did not get to. Because obviously we gotta end the show within an hour, but really appreciate you coming on. I thought it was great.
Thanks, Andrew. No, this is really fun. Glad to talk to you anytime, man.
Hey guys, and we'll see you all next week on the IAIB Spotlight. Take care.